Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Kristen. As Kristen said, I'm Alix Rosenfeld. This is my cat, Winifred. She jumped up last minute, so she's joining us for at least a little while. I am the institutional giving manager here at the Wilma Theater, but I'm also a dramaturg in the region and locally. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists for the evening. First up, we have Yury Urnov, who is our lead artistic director for the 2020-2021 season. Welcome, Yury.
Thank you, Alex.
And we have our HotHouse members, of course, the stars of the evening. First up, we have Brandon J. Pierce, who is the co-creator for Code Black Planet. Brandon's Wi-Fi is a little spotty this evening, so we might not see his face too often, but we'll see. Fingers crossed. Next up, we have Krista Apple, who is the lead artist for Clay. Hello, Krista. And then we have Ross Beschler, who is the lead artist for Expired. Welcome, Ross. And then we have Melanie Finister, who is the lead artist for Lagniappe. Welcome, Melanie. And then you might have noticed we have an ASL interpreter with us this evening. Donna Ellis comes to us from Hands Up Production, and we are so excited to have her here with us. We're very grateful. So we are zooming in from a lot of different places. Some of us are in Maryland, some of us are in Virginia, but the Wilma Theater itself is situated in Lenapehoking, also known as Philadelphia. And we acknowledge that our theater is located on land that is not ours. We acknowledge that the Lenni Lenape people are the original people of this land and that they continue to be a vibrant community. We acknowledge that we benefit from systems that are rooted in capital, created and expanded by the free labor of Black people in the form of chattel slavery and legal and cultural segregation. We stand in solidarity with Black people in fierce advocacy for equality and justice. Thank you so much for being present for that acknowledgement and for attending this HotHouse Shorts panel. And an extra thank you to our season honorary producers, Linda and David Glickstein, and to the other members of our honorary producer circle for their support. Thank you so much. And so before we dive in, I'm just going to give you a very quick rundown of the evening. We're going to be chit-chatting. Oh, there when he goes. I encourage you all to pepper in your thoughts and your questions into the chat as we go. I'll be lifting them up and checking out the chat as we chat. This is going to be a pretty conversational evening, so we want you to be a part of it. As Kristen said, be sure to make sure that your chat is set to panelists and attendees so that we can all see it. And then if you do want to hang back with your questions for a little while, we are going to set aside some time at the end for a Q&A if you prefer to wait. But as I said, we also welcome your questions and thoughts as we go. And after we wrap up, we will have a few announcements, and then I'll send you out into the rest of your Thursday evening. But we will finish up roughly around 8 o'clock. So let's get started. Super excited for this. So my first question is actually for Yury. So as the lead artistic director for this season, what was the process of creating this program? This is something we haven't done before.
Well, this was a challenging year, as we all probably noticed by now, and we were looking at just possibilities, opportunities that rose up with that. And we're trying, with all the, with all the tragedy that this year brought, to still see, how could we use this moment as the moment of opportunity more than a moment of despair, right? Mm-hmm. And surprisingly so, it brought some liberation, I think, that we did some things that we otherwise wouldn't have done. And we had enough bravery or whatever to experiment with things otherwise that would stay as our plans or dreams. And I do think that this program was exactly that. It is. I think that's exactly what it's doing. It's trying to offer new experiences, and it's trying to introduce our HotHouse company in a different quality, because we are used to seeing them as performers, clearly as actors in these shows, and but each of them is more than that. Is this and something else and something else and something else, and it's kind of weird to hold this treasure close to the chest, right? So we offered company to come up with the ideas, and then plenty of ideas came in, and a lot of them made it into these shorts. And what I think one of the parameters that was there, we were looking for all kinds of diversity, including aesthetical diversity, and I think that also was quite successful because at least the four pieces we're looking at right now, and more pieces we're looking at the spring, they're all so amazingly different. It's everything. Every new piece is a new genre, is a new approach to what can be done with the limited resources of this year, from documentary, to the internet journey, to the side, to as you've seen, to the radio play, to the video production, and this is what excites me a lot. It somehow, for some reason, it just excites me a lot.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, we see these HotHouse company members primarily as performers on our stage and stories created by other people. And I'm going to ask this to really any member of our HotHouse company can jump in on this. But what was it like to make content for a company that you have collaborated with for so long in a certain kind of way? And now there was this opportunity to collaborate in a new way. Who will answer?
I'll start. I'd say first it was kind of intimidating, actually, because, because of exactly what you're saying. I do have a way of being with the company, and the last year was so much about finding, we were already innovating new ways of just getting together in person, for a company who's so much about our techniques and our ways of working are so much about being in person and sharing breath and sharing the body. Like we've been working towards that very intentionally and very deeply for years. And so to suddenly have physical presence taken away from us is like a huge identity crisis. Like, what do we do? We try to meet on Zoom, and we do. And, you'd like many people have also found, it's like, oh, there's a certain level of intimacy and connection that's available on Zoom, but there's a certain amount of physical presence that's just not. And I know I think we got a lot of inspiration from, we made these little Hello World videos, like I think Blanca was leading some sessions, and we were all there together and trying to figure out what like maybe getting together is not working as well as we wanted to. What can we do? It's like, well, let's start experimenting with video. Let's make things. Let's take our phones. Let's take our cameras. Let's make some things. And we made some videos, and they inspired us to make a couple more, to try to make a couple more videos. And so by the time this offer came, we were all feeling like, well, here's something that feels both experimental and interesting and personal, and sort of, I guess what we were discovering is that if you let an artist loose with theirs, with not a full film crew, but just your phone and like your surroundings, you're going to get a very unique, particular lens on the world. And so I think we were really trying to harness some of that energy. And so I knew that was what was being asked of us. And we've done, and I know that we've worked together as a group. We've all been in rooms where we've devised theater, working with guest artists. And so I know from firsthand experience that everyone in that room is a really creative, has a lot of beautiful creative things to offer. But it was intimidating to sort of to captain a little team of them and say okay, here's my idea and let's see where it goes. That was so that was the first thing. It was just a little intimidating. But then we got into our first room together, started throwing ideas around, and it was just kind of off to the races. That's what it felt like.
Did you all gather together at some point, or was it very much you knew you had your teams pretty early on?
Well, that was interesting. I think everybody was invited to submit ideas, and everybody did. And some of those ideas, I believe, are still sort of in the works or in process or somewhere on the back burner. And then we had to decide, we had to have a casting process. We had to decide, like, all right, here are the projects we're going to move forward with, and here's how we're going to put people together. And it ended up being very practical. Like, there was some, like, Krista's piece right from the beginning was going to be a lot about voice. And so there was thought of, like, who has some amazing voices. And there's another piece that I think is still in process that was a lot about dance. And so some people had more of a dance background went there. But also, a lot of those people were going to be on Heroes of the Fourth Turning. So a lot, like, which was the play that everybody potted up and went to the Poconos to make. And so they were all going to be working together. So the sort of the practicality of, like, well, we're going to be in space together. So it just ended up kind of being a combination of need and practicality. And then we ended up and then we had a first little meeting and we met and talked. But we never all got together as a group, like me and Krista and Melanie and Yury as creators to talk about what we were making and coordinate with each other. We never did that.
And you actually mentioned Krista as being an audio piece, and I want to jump over to that because something that I was curious about with this idea of not being able to share breath and yet still engage our audiences. At the beginning of your piece, you asked people to grab a mug of something hot to drink, and I was wondering what function you wanted that to have with the audience.
Yeah, as we were creating this piece, obviously as all of us are working on Zoom and all of us are working in isolation as theater artists, right? It's so apparent to us that the ritual of space is one of the many rituals that we share when we walk into a theater to either tell or to receive, to participate in a story together in a physical space. And so when you take that part of it away, I was just kind of left with this question of, okay, well, is there still a way that we can actually share something as artists and audience members? And if we can't share it in the same space or in the same time, can we share it through the same activity or through a shared experience? Clay originally was going to be much less of a fictional narrative than it ended up being. And originally it was intended to be a little bit more of like an artistic or a creative invitation for audience members to kind of tour and experience their own homes and their own spaces together. And the more that we dove into that idea, the more excited we got by it, and also the more challenging it became in terms of practicality, just knowing that everyone's space is different and would invite different things. So that invitation of having a mug, having something to drink, and having that little ritual of your own as an audience member was the one little piece of that we maintained.
Had you always envisioned that the piece would be an audio, like an oral experience, or was it more out of practicality?
It was always the intent. As a theater artist, as Ross talked about, like we were experimenting with Zoom and HotHouse, and parts of it were really exciting, and parts of it were really challenging and heartbreaking at times. And also as an acting teacher, like I'm on Zoom all the time and engaging in artistic experience all the time in this way. And even in September, I had exhausted some of my curiosity around it. And so when I proposed the idea, it was always meant to be auditory, because I was just really curious about how else I and we as HotHouse members could engage our artistry and our audiences in new ways.
What were the challenges of only having the oral to tell a story?
That's a great question. I think, I think for each of us in different ways, we realize, how much we rely on the visual. And so the storytelling of it meant that we had to be really intentional about the words that we used, the language that we used, so that we were creating an evocative world just through words, right? So in a lot of ways, it's like we had to think like novelists and audiobook writers and podcast creators, like how is language doing the world building for us when we are used to like lights up and we're on stage and the world is there, right? It was a very different part of our brains that we were engaging, and it was actually really exciting. I think I think there were more, I think it felt like more opportunity than challenge along the way in that regard.
Richard Finch said, I didn't pick my favorite mug. Maybe that was a provocation moment. But another thing that I wanted to lift up that was sent to us before is from Jack Lovewell. And it's more of like a meditation on this, but he said, how much are we drawn to the habit of drinking a cup of coffee in the morning by basic feelings associated with holding a warm cup and stopping what we are doing to sip from it? Which I thought was just kind of like this lovely thought about like this commonplace item that we forget about, and it's part of our everyday lives.
Alix, I'll drop into the chat a link later. The poem that inspired Clay originally, that inspired the entire project, is a poem by the Irish poet David Whyte called "Everything Is Waiting for You," and it's a poem about the poetry and the beauty of our everyday lives and objects and spaces that we often overlook.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, speaking of like this everyday and the ritual, Melanie, there's something very ritualistic about your piece and about exploring something that comes from your family, from generations of your family, this recipe, and I wanted to know what it was like to mine your own personal history for this documentary style piece that you created.
Yeah. It was wonderful. It was full of unexpected treasures, actually, to kind of go. The time that I spent with my mother, especially because, it was like COVID-19, we're in isolation, whatever. My own little family was having major trauma and depression and all kinds of issues. We felt very cut off. And my children felt very cut off. So to go and my parents felt very cut off. So to go home, mask up, I actually carried a bunch of frozen food, things that I had prepared from home, and brought them to my parents in Maryland, and stocked their freezer, and had my son, Adam, pull out his iPhone and tape my mother and I talking about recipes and food, and it was wonderful because, first of all, what I thought would be just like a 5-minute chat or so, well, silly me, it is my mother, and my mother can talk a lot, but it ended up being probably about 45 minutes of tape that he made, and now I have this history captured. And we spent time going through all of our old cookbooks and stuff, and it was amazing. So, yeah. And to then trace even through my grandmother's and remembering, pulling up all these memories from childhood and food and how it's all related. And, at a time when, I don't know, I felt very, very disconnected, very lonely, very hurt. So it was soothing. It did, comfort food had new meaning for me.
Is that why you chose the gumbo instead of like another recipe from your family?
Without a doubt. It is probably the quintessential food in my life. Like if I was told to say like one food that, meant me, in a bowl, it would be that dish. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think another very unique aspect of your piece is that you worked with who I like to call citizen artists. And so you worked with, I wrote it down, the Northern Children's Services, a nonprofit supporting healthy development of children while stabilizing families for the health of the community. And I was wondering what drew you to that? How did you find that nonprofit? What drew you to them?
So the director of Northern Children's Services is a friend of mine. We've known each other, oh boy, 3 kids, at least 25 years. So, and although she's not been with Northern all that time, I had been volunteering with Northern Children's Services on and off over the years. And my friend Renata Cobbs Fletcher was, we would just sort of, we would take these distanced walks. We would mask up and go outside, or sometimes we'd get on our bikes to, two middle-aged Black women on bikes and masks. And, sort of combing through the neighborhoods, and we would just talk about our lives and what was going on. And I started talking about this project that we, the opportunity to create a short piece that the Wilma had presented me with. And then and I said, the thing is that like, once I make the food, I've got no one to give it to. I literally said that. I was like, I don't know. Should I try to take it down to Love Park and see if I can feed some people who really need food? I don't know what to do. And she goes, come do it with us. And I went, oh, of course. Of course. So that's how that evolved.
Was there anything you learned from those women, those teens that you were working with?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I learned that apparently Chick-fil-A has got the most amazing food in the world. They love Chick-fil-A. I've never eaten Chick-fil-A, so I didn't know. But as soon as I get a chance, I guess I'm going to have to go try it out. Now, I learned tons from them. The first thing was like, just, I don't know, like these young women have been sort of, they had their own little pod and their own little cluster. They've been sort of isolated there on Northern together because they live on the premises. And they were very shy initially, but they really opened up. And I think the gift that they gave me was, company, and a chance to feel like I could pass something on. And I was also surprised by how many of them actually were familiar with gumbo and okra, so that was heartening to me. And learning about their kids, and I don't know, it was fun. I think the biggest thing is that they gave me company and a little joy when my heart was low. And yeah.
Jack from Allentown says, I love the comments about okra, and watching it cook the roux was interesting as well. And then Richard Finch said that, and he was referring to New Orleans, but he said, one of the best food cities in the entire country.
Baby, you done said something there. I'm going to tell you what. There is no place in this country. Now, Philadelphia is a good food city. I'm not even pretending like we don't have like some hopping restaurants. We have good food. But so much of the food in New Orleans, not only is it delicious, but it is of us in every way. It is, you're pulling from everyone in that region. It's got a long tradition, historical tradition. It's special.
Melanie, I also remember how it started. Like, my first memory about this piece was you describing the recipe itself, like the handwritten. Like, you open the book and there's this piece of paper written by probably your mother, or if not grandmother, and how this small and already yellow and used and with food stains on this piece of paper carries the information.
That particular recipe is, it's unsightly actually. It's like got splotches and grease and oh boy. And it's faded out in places, and but it is what it is.
And Lee and Etzold, our lovely Lee, says, serving the gumbo on family china nearly made me cry. I think my grandam had the same china.
Oh my goodness.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, that china is, that's very sweet. No, I cherish that china from my grandmother too. Yeah. It's old ivory, Syracuse.
Oh, wow. And then Kristen Finger says, my mom has a recipe book filled with so many generations of handwriting of delicious recipes.
Isn't that, it's amazing. But, you know, this is the thing. I mean, we all have this rich legacy that we take for granted. And to be able to go back, revisit that, reacquaint myself. I don't know if we hadn't have had COVID-19 that I would have necessarily been doing that. Because frankly, life is so busy, and so much of the time, you know, normally I'd be out running around, and, you know, the kids are off doing their own thing. I mean, my kids eat more than their fair share of Wendy's. I'm really embarrassed to say, but it's true. And I got no problem with it in the end because, you know, it's busy. Things are crazy. But the best thing to me out of the whole pandemic shutdown was an opportunity to kind of bring everybody back to the table, as it were. And we sat together and ate together. Like, you know, I mean, I don't think we've ever spent that much time around a table. Just my family, and that was special. And to go back and pull up those recipes and even try to teach them to my own kids some.
You know, another piece that I actually felt a great sense of community from was Code Black Planet. And I think part of it, of course, is that there is also that mining of personhood, I think, that's so prevalent in that piece. But Brandon, I was wondering if you could also speak to your piece is unique for so many reasons, but one of them is that you are a co-creator with several co-creators. And I was curious to know what it was like to balance the different perspectives and the different ideas, because you have this collage effect of different disciplines.
Well, it really starts at the beginning of the whole thing, because we knew we wanted to do something that was Black related, but we didn't know what that was going to be, and you know, exactly what specifically we wanted to talk about. So it all kind of started with us just sort of bringing pieces that we already had, because this was all after you know, George Floyd and the protests and all of that energy, and we all sort of had things that we were thinking about or on our minds, or, you know, sitting in the vault. So we all sort of like brought all our different like pieces, like different like music and poems and things that were on our minds in that moment. And it sort of became, how do we create something where we can use all of those things? So that's sort of how the sort of collage idea came about. Just like, you know, sharing pieces and responding to them. And then just like having further discussions about that and like what ideas that sort of brought up. And then at the same time, we, at some point in our conversation, we I guess we were sort of talking about having a space that was like an all Black space. And then that somehow went to going to space, outer space. And that led to like having like a planet that was like a Black planet, you know, very much like if Wakanda was like a whole planet, which sort of fuels the somewhat of the narrative of the piece, to give it a spine. But a lot of it's just, you know, we want to, but also just, we wanted to get all the crazy ideas that we could inside the piece.
Right. So, because I think, you know, knowing who all of you are, I did feel like there were individual pieces that where all of you got to shine, but that it felt very balanced and very comprehensive. Melanie says, "Take me to your Black planet. Get on board the mothership." And actually, this leads me to another question. But what was the experience of working with an all-Black team?
Oh, it was fantastic. Especially like in the time that we did it last summer, I think is when we started it. For one, it was just nice to be able to talk about all the things that were happening in the country and having space for that. It was also just fun because we all had so many like weird ideas. So it's always nice when you're not the only person with weird ideas. Because sometimes we would just, like riff about all the like sci-fi stuff that would never be in the piece. And you're not necessarily going to pick up on, but we had a lot of fun just like talking about like what Black Planet was like. And, so it was a lot of fun, especially because it would be something like I would share like a piece of music and then, Anthony would think of an idea for that and like how we could actually like put that into a thing. And then, bouncing back and forth for something and having somebody take your idea and make it into another like awesome idea. So it was a ton of fun. And a lot of times in that point in the pandemic, just being able to like have those like meetings where we could just like jump on there and just like, talk about Black Planet for like 15 minutes and then maybe just like chat about wherever else our mind went for another 15 minutes was great. And also just having a chance to just be creative in many ways that are like not how I'm normally being creative in a normal world.
Do you normally, so you say this is not normally how you create in the world, because obviously for the Wilma, you're primarily an actor like so many of our HotHouse members, but is like creating content new for you, or is it something you've done elsewhere?
I mean, just like the form of content that we're doing. I mean, because since I wasn't acting, I was at home a lot, just sort of like writing songs and, getting to put that in the piece felt really cool. But also just, I guess being in that position of really making a film kind of thing or a short video. And the ways we had to navigate doing that because we couldn't all be in the same room doing it. So, you have this situation where it's like Anthony drops off equipment and then I got to like set up the equipment and then hop on Zoom so everybody can help me figure out that, the camera angles or the lighting and stuff like that. And then getting direction from Zoom and this sort of weird space of like you're being directed, but you also have to self-direct because you're the person who can see all the stuff there and having people try to help you figure it out across Zoom. It's wild.
Jack from Allentown, I believe this is for you, Brandon, but he said, you really captured how filming from a cell phone can be so capturing, the contrast of light and dark and movement being so simultaneous. And I actually think that really encapsulates the piece as a whole for me, because I do think that there's this lovely balance between light and dark and joy and tension in the work. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's another question I have is how did you find that balance? Especially because it was coming from a fraught place. This summer was fraught for us, for everybody, but particularly for the Black community.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, because for one thing, that the piece, it focuses on so many different things because life is complex and it's full of so many different things of dark stuff, but there's always like joy you can find. And I mean, we found a lot of joy in just making the piece, which I think comes through because it's wild, but also just like being able to just make fun of like how terrible the country can be sometimes, or the really like ridiculous things, because some of it's just like absurd. Like life's absurd, and some of the stuff in this country is just like absolutely wild. And I think in a lot of cases it was, there's like a sense of relief from that because it that gives you a little bit of power when you can sort of point out how stupid something is. So yeah, I think like really finding like, I mean, like, and also just like the juxtaposition of some of the things, like for example, the in the part where it's seemingly I'm getting pulled over by the cops, but then it turns into this music video, but then it's which it was making fun of those kind of music videos, but at the same time is also showing like a very dark situation, and the lyrics are talking about really dark things. So you know, because all that stuff is there in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, Ross, your piece, which of course is like this epic pastiche of so many things, but you also kind of leaned into what is sociopolitically happening in this moment, which I appreciated, and but something that I also felt is, or I'm interested in knowing why you chose to have us lean into technology, because I feel like so much of there's an impetus right now for theater makers to be like, pretend you're not watching this on a computer. There's no screen here. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, but you had us lean into the computer and really use it. And why did you have us go for that?
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad that, you know, that was, I mean, like, you know, when you're making something like this, and I'm sure everyone here has the same experience, like you sort of, you can't necessarily, like you shape it at the end, but like what sort of shows up is a little bit set by your intentionality. So like as creators, we were like definitely part of our intentionality was, you know, let's make something of this moment of right now that's acknowledging the world around us. And, you know, it's interesting. It's sort of a larger conversation about like, but there's been a lot of talk, and I think actually Brad Rothbard is here, who wrote this amazing review that where he sort of touches on like, is this theater or isn't it? Which I think is like one of the more like I'm is a conversation I'm really fascinated by. And I think something that theater artists do is we are very interested in space. We're very interested in the reality of, you know, like at the end of the day, theater is just people in a space together, and we all, as theater artists, we've worked and trained really hard to like not deny the truth of anything or invent the truth of anything. So you're dealing with there, and like, you know, if you have a mop, like that mop and like that chair, like that's the world of the play.
Right.
And what you make with that. And so for me, like it works very much similarly in virtual space. Like I'm using this space the same way that I would use a space with a bucket and a mop and a chair and like a knife. Like I'm making what I can with this and acknowledging the truth of that. So it just, and I like the technology. I'm interested in it. You know, I'm interested to see how much of an engaging experience you can have. It was funny. One thing we discovered is, so I got the benefit of having made a version of this and then sharing it with Yury and the Wilma and getting some feedback on it, you know, before we went completely live with it. And in the original, the version, like a lot of the content didn't change too much, but what really people were getting hung up on was the entrance to the piece, which is a lot about, you know, you log into the program, and then like there's a problem with your password, and eventually we had it originally set up because we were trying to make a way to be like, we really want people to feel like this is on their computer, it's happening on their computer. So there was like a little simulated like download experience. You have to download an app and then you have to log onto it, and there were just a couple more steps, and what we found was people were terrified that they were going to download. So there's like, oh God, it's asking me to download something. I have to put something on my computer. I needs a password. And it was so interesting because it made me realize, because at first we were like, come on, people, get used to the technology. But then I realized, oh no, this space is so personal and intimate, really intimate, in a way that like, you know, and I'll just repeat like a metaphor I came up with at the time, but it's like you go to the theater and you understand the contract between you and the space and the people there. You know that somebody's going to get up on stage and maybe they pull out a gun, you know, but you know, and there's a lot, you know, this is sort of up and down about, you know, they're like stage combat people who are like, never point a gun at an audience because it will ruin the illusion and they'll all know you're pointing a gun at the, like, or it'll be too dangerous. I don't know, but that's neither here or there. But you enter in a contract and they're on that space, and you know whatever they do, you're probably going to be safe. Like the actor is not going to attack you, probably. But all of a sudden, like, but doing a piece on people's computers is a little bit more like inviting an actor to come to your home and do a monologue. And all of a sudden you've got someone in your home, and whatever they do might like if they pull out a gun there, you're like, oh no, oh gosh, I hope this is part of the piece. And I just feel like it was interesting to discover that people felt similarly about their personal computers. Like, oh God, if I download something, like you could wipe out my, like, I'm just so vulnerable right now. So like, it was just interesting to learn that and encouraging to learn that, you know?
Right. Right.
And so we made the beginning of the piece a lot simpler. We still wanted to have the element of you have a password, but we got rid of some of the more like, we didn't want people to really feel actually in danger and confused about their computer. So
Sure.
So that was an interesting thing to learn, that in leaning into the technology, there's all these unexpected things that come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From Lee Etzold, artists can make space a place. Curious about the things that everyone felt help them do that. Yeah, if you have a thought in the chat, drop it in the chat. And then from Melanie, we have such a complicated relationship with our technology. The piece gives rise to some of the anxiety. Absolutely. And then actually, since Brad Rothbart is here, I have a question, Ross, for you from Brad. They ask, in my infamous Hold My Beer review, I said there were echoes of early 70s video art, specifically Adrian Piper, in terms of the style. Was that an influence in your process, or did I make it up?
I love that review partially because I was like, oh, hooray! Look at all these artists that I'm quoting. Those artists specifically had not been in my my view for that. I'm actually going to. I don't know. I created a forum that you can get to at the end of the piece that I don't know if everyone went to or saw. I'm actually going to drop it in the chat right now. Do I have to send it to everybody? Panelists and attendees right now, where I sort of just created a couple entries on, among other things, some of the artist influences. And the most intentional and explicit artist influences for this were assemblage artists. I was always thinking of this very much as because, you know, it was sort of like the piece initially was as simple as going to the afterworld of things and ideas to look for a dead language. And, you know, it obviously evolved a bit from there, but always going, and the underworld became more specifically like the afterworld, like the life inside your computer. Like, you know, it's a fact that when you delete things from your computer, they don't actually get deleted. That section of space in your hard drive just kind of gets sectioned off and eventually overwritten. And so that idea that there are all these things in there floating around, the afterlife, the Hades of your computer, and I wanted the sort of demons and the style of the piece to be what you make from that detritus. And so I was looking at artists like Bettier Sarr, Robert Rauschenberg, Joseph Cornell was my first go-to. His bird boxes, the way he took like, you know, found materials and arranged something very like it took a lot of like anarchic materials and created something very deliberate and structured from it. And also like I think when I first started, I even had an idea of the websites being as specific as like little boxes inside a sort of Joseph Cornell like construction. Yeah.
Let me see, Brad.
So that was so those were but you know, like but like I'm certainly personally I am influenced. Like I have spent a lot of my life like going to museums and being very interested in video artists and installation artists, and that's been a big part of my interesting like the aesthetics that I'm interested in for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
And we have, our chat is popping off. Brad said, I'm just always interested in the phenomenology, how much of the piece is me bringing my experience to it. Absolutely. And Lee commented, you bring the other half of all performances, Brad. Actually, this is a perfect moment to get into some other questions. Richard Finch, Krista, your piece seemed to cut off at an unfinished moment. What would have been the next scene when we came back from the commercial?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I really wanted the ending to build, like I wanted the idea of all the stuff we had been talking about and all the stuff in our houses and our lives just to kind of like pile onto us, right? And then disappear so that we are left with that question of like, what else is here? I don't quite know what the next scene would have been, but you know, it does remind me of just how much story we, you know, in the team of HotHouse artists that I was working with, including Brandon, who's with us tonight. You know, as we were devising and brainstorming together, we came up with so much story that we wanted to put into this story. But at a certain point, we stepped back and we realized that we had actually created an entire series of podcasts. And Kelly from the Wilma had to sit me down one day and be like, okay, Krista, what do you actually need? Because you actually only have 15 minutes at the time. And the Wilma was very generous and let us go to 30 instead. There was a time travel element in Clay at one point. Brandon invented this character of a scientist who Brandon's still kind of quietly obsessed with that guy and want to write him into another story somewhere. So Richard, to answer your question, there's a scientist. He time travels. Brandon Pierce will play him someday.
Theater is so iterative, right? Maybe there will be a Clay part 2 or an entirely different piece that is inspired from Clay. And actually, I have another question here from Christopher Colucci, another frequent flyer here at the Wilma, frequent collaborator. And he asked, what is one thing that you have learned from these video, and I'm going to add audio projects, that you hope to bring to the stage on your next opening night? And this is really for anybody. That's a toughie.
I'm going to have my cell phone with me and live stream the whole thing.
Let's see. Sorry, you had to have something
No,
else.
I feel like I have a better answer than that actually, but it's so interesting. Like that feels like such a big question actually.
Well, right, because there's this element of like you had this opportunity to create something. So how do you then take this like generative quality, this generative role, and infuse it into acting again? Or what does it mean to be a storyteller in a different way? There's so many different elements of storytelling that happened in these HotHouse shorts. So maybe this is just something to meditate on. And maybe you don't have an answer yet. Or maybe you do. Who am I to say? Let's see, what the chat is popping off again. From Lee.
Alix, it's
yes,
Melanie. I'm going to cook. I promise you guys. I'm going to pull that great big ridiculous pot and that huge paddle that looks like witchy poo over a cauldron, and I'm going to make us a big batch of gumbo, everybody, and we are going to eat.
You're making me so hungry, Melanie. I'm starving. Gumbo play, absolutely. Brad says, please, seriously, as someone with a disability, okay, yeah, the stage has to be curved and completely different like you did the year of 2019. That's a good idea. Like playing with our stage, that's a good thing to think about. Thank you. And Brad mentioned that seriously, as someone with a disability, this moment is the most accessible theater has ever been. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something. It's funny that I haven't really thought about how that impacts like my work on stage necessarily, but definitely I'm thinking a lot more about accessibility. Like it's suddenly becoming the ability to share work with audiences more, and then to sort of, we've already had conversations about like the complicated pieces that we made. Like we made a piece that sort of like it's very difficult to make more accessible for people who are visually challenged or audio challenged. We just, because we hadn't quite set it up that way, and in retrospect we're thinking like, oh wow, this is something we can be thinking about a lot earlier on. So I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons about access that I'm going to be thinking about very deeply as we move forward. And I'm curious to see if that has an impact on my life on stage. I don't know.
Perhaps. Brandon is actually in the middle of rehearsing and creating Fat Ham. So Brandon, this is maybe that Christopher Colucci's question about one thing you have learned from these video projects that you hope to bring to the stage on your next opening night. Maybe this is more present for you than for anybody else, because your next opening night is coming quickly. Is there anything you learned from the experience of creating Code Black Planet that you are using for Fat Ham?
You know, I would say the one thing that it definitely reinforced, it's reinforced the right word, but, you know, just sort of finding my voice, I guess. And you know, continuing that journey of having ownership of like what I'm doing when I'm collaborating, you know. And you know, it's I love doing Black Planet. Having that chance to like just collaborate with other people, and I'm definitely out here on Fat Ham enjoying being able to collaborate again.
Yeah.
And also, you know, there's a lot of being on camera. So since we're doing that out here, I'm definitely taking the some lessons from that.
Thank you. And we have maybe time for one more question. If there's anything that anybody else wants to drop into the chat, now's the time.
You know, it occurs to me that when you talk about accessibility, one of the things about working this way also is that it's easier to include more artists who have, you know, just in different circumstances, who might not be able to be as mobile. And I know, Brandon, you on Black Planet, I think Lika, you know, her participation, I don't know, maybe you can speak a little bit about her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's, you know, I know that, I don't want to speak for her per se, but I know that for her, it felt great being able to work on that, because being somebody with a disability, you know, you sometimes get overlooked, or it's like, those, what you're going through isn't being respected in the way it should be. So I know she was like grateful to be able to like work with us, and you know, we were able to take the time when she needed the time and whatnot. And you know, the other thing, you know, talking about being able to work with people, like I've never gotten to work with Malika, so it was like a great opportunity to be able to work with her, because sometimes you can't always get to choose your collaborators when you're just like getting hired for jobs. And so it was great to be able to just, you know, come together, especially because I think we all needed it. And you know, that's the great thing about living in the time we do now, is that we have all this technology to be able to do this stuff, which is like, it's wild to me. It's like anybody can just like go and like create things, you know. Kids do it all the time.
Christopher Clucci says, thanks for the work, y'all. Made me look forward to Fridays. Agreed. And then from our own Bill D'Agostino, what surprised you watching or listening to other artists' shorts?
I'll say I was intrigued by how there was a lot of interest in fracturing and incompleteness and nonlinearity. Like there was like not a single one of us made like a little play. You know, like there was a lot of like we were really looking around for different containers for stories, like Krista's, yours just really feels like a time capsule to me, you know. Like I feel like that was a dominant metaphor in it, but then the thing you made was also a time capsule, you know, of just objects placed inside it. I felt like mine was trying to go for like an assemblage of things that, and like Black Planet is still blowing my mind, because like I like Brandon especially, like you take on so many different roles in it that by the end I'm like, who is this person? You know, like going from like the creator to the viewer to the subject, and like the shifting of that perspective the whole time is like really, it's really it's from deep inside the piece, and so there isn't a container around the piece that gives it to you easily, and I just love that about it. And so like there was a lot of similarity and interest in messing around with it, and you know, like Melanie made a documentary about cooking, you know, like I there was this similar interest. I was surprised at how much we were like, let's break out of something and do something that we don't even maybe even know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. The playing with form was so surprising and pleasant and welcome. I think that was what surprised me the most was just the freedom that you all found, even in the kind of tight box we're all put in. Literally, right now, I'm in a tight box because of this pandemic. But I always believe that limitations can lead to some of the greatest explorations, which I do think you all beautifully embarked on and just accomplished something pretty extraordinary, especially in this time when we're all tired and sad and going through something extraordinary. So yeah. And Lee says, it was such a beautiful invitation to meet you all in a new way. Thank you. And I very much agree. I feel like we're coming to perhaps a good stopping point. But before I let you all go, I just have a couple of announcements. So there's still time to engage with these pieces. Clay ends this weekend. I'm so sad. March 7th is going to be the last day that you can listen to Clay. So go back, listen to it 1,000 more times. You still have time. And then the other HotHouse shorts are going to be available until July 31st. And we do have some more coming, so stay tuned. And then we have, of course, as I mentioned, Fat Ham, written by co-artistic director James Imes, directed by co-artistic director Morgan Green, and Brandon J. Pierce is going to be in there, so you definitely need to check it out. That is going to be premiering soon. It's going to be available for streaming March 25th, I believe, March 25th. And then finally, we have our annual fete. Our annual party, it's coming up. It's going to be on Sunday, April 11th at 5:30 p.m. It's going to be hosted by HotHouse members Jaylene Clark Owens and Justin Jane, and musical guest Low-Cut Connie. Very excited. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a party. You don't want to miss it. You can sign up for the HotHouse shorts. You can get your tickets to Fat Ham. You can get your tickets to FET all on our website at wilmatheater.org. And I'm so excited to see you all there. You don't want to miss this. We're doing so much. The Wilma is alive and vibrating. But thank you all so much for attending this discussion, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening.
Thank you, Alix.
Take care.